The thing you need to know about me, right from the jump, is that I only have two real passions in this life: decent Wi-Fi and making food that smells amazing. Like, transcendentally, stop what you're doing and come eat this amazing. I'm not talking about basic meatloaf. I'm talking about slow-braised Korean short ribs where the aroma is practically a physical entity, floating through the air like a delicious, meaty ghost. I live in a perfectly normal, sun-drenched little house in the suburbs of Phoenix. Standard-issue stucco, two-car garage, manicured lawn. The only thing that isn't standard issue? The olfactory output from my kitchen. It was a Tuesday afternoon in early April, the kind of day where the air conditioning is fighting a noble, losing battle. And I was making carnitas a la naranja. You know the drill. Pork shoulder slow-simmered in lard, orange juice, milk, and spices. The smell that drifts out of that pot? It's happiness marinated in citrus and fat. I had the windows open a crack, giving the neighborhood a free, glorious scent bath when the universe decided to send its own personal aroma antagonist to my doorstep. Knock, knock. Knock? Not a friendly neighbor knock. This was the rapid-fire, impatient drumming of someone whose personal zen was being tragically interrupted by deliciousness. I wiped my hands on my apron, which, I should note, had a cartoon pig saying, "Don't go bacon my heart," and opened the door. Standing there, silhouetted against the blinding Arizona sun, was Sheila Montgomery. But everyone in the neighborhood, and I mean everyone, just called her Karen. She was sporting the haircut, that asymmetrical helmet of blonde, and the expression, a tightly wound knot of profound offense, usually reserved for finding a minor discrepancy on a tax form. "Mr. Davies," she began, her voice strained and dry, like old parchment being ripped. She didn't ask how I was. She never did. "Karen," I replied, giving her my best, most benign smile. "To what do I owe this distinct pleasure? Did you finally figure out my Wi-Fi password?" She ignored the humor, of course. Humor is kryptonite to the chronically aggrieved. "It's your cooking smells," she declared, as if announcing a plague of locusts. "It's aggressive. It's permeating my house. My linens smell like pork. My cat smells like some kind of foreign spice market. I cannot have this." I paused, genuinely confused. "It's carnitas, Karen. It's slow-cooked pork. It smells fantastic. That's the point. The point is that I am a vegan, and I find the smell of rendered animal fat deeply offensive. It's an infringement on my quality of life. I am trying to meditate, and all I can smell is grease." She punctuated grease with a shudder. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "Look, I'm sorry my culinary hobbies interfere with your spiritual ones, but I'm cooking in my kitchen, inside my house, in America, where we are still, last time I checked, allowed to simmer meat." She bristled, her jaw hardening. "This is not over, Mr. Davies." And with that, she spun on her heel and marched back across the perfectly manicured lawn, her pastel athletic shoes crunching on the gravel drive. I closed the door, shaking my head, and went back to basting my pork. I figured that was that, a minor flare-up of suburban absurdity. I was wrong. The universe had simply drawn the curtain on Act 1. The next day, it was chicken tikka masala. Rich, smoky, complex, a little blast of Delhi heat in the Arizona desert. Karen showed up again, but this time she brought backup, a clipboard. This was a whole new level of ridiculousness. "Mr. Davies," she droned, holding the clipboard like a shield. "I've filed a formal complaint with the Pine Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, Section 4.C, Nuisance provision. No resident shall engage in any activity that creates a noxious, offensive, or excessive odor that unreasonably interferes with the peaceable enjoyment of neighboring properties. I just stared at her. Are you seriously trying to weaponize the HOA against the smell of garam masala? This is incredible. Do they have a smell committee now? They will address it at the next quarterly meeting, she said, stone-faced. In the meantime, I've taken initial steps. She produced a small, silver item from her pocket. It was one of those tiny, travel-sized Glade plug-in air fresheners. I installed this in the common fence line, adjacent to your kitchen window, to try and neutralize the offensive output. I squinted. Is that spring rain scented? You are fighting my carefully balanced spices with synthetic rainfall? That's almost insulting. It's a mitigation measure, she sniffed. And I'd like you to invest in a higher capacity extractor fan for your range. Karen, I have a perfectly adequate fan. It does its job. Clearly not. My bedroom is directly opposite your kitchen. The prevailing wind currents carry every single particle of your food dust directly into my open window. I woke up this morning convinced I was sleeping in a spice rack. I sighed dramatically. I really didn't want to fight this battle, but the smug, self-satisfied look on her face was starting to curdle my good mood faster than milk on a hot day. Look, I get it. The smells are strong. They are powerful. They are undeniably delicious. I will try to be more conscientious. I will keep the windows closed. And I did. For about a week, I cooked under lockdown. I cranked my perfectly adequate fan to max power, closed every window, and ran the air purifier. I made a magnificent beef and Guinness stew. The smells stayed mostly inside, which made me sad. But Karen seemed to temporarily recede into the shadows of her own house, presumably meditating in a cloud of manufactured spring rain. I thought the détente was holding. Then came the note. It wasn't taped to the door, it was laminated. I found it on my front lawn, pinned down by a decorative rock. It was single-spaced, impeccably formatted, and titled Formal Culinary Violation Notice, Ongoing Odor Transgression, Case 2025 or 15. The contents were a magnificent spiral of passive aggression. It detailed, with specific dates and times, the toxic plumes of identifiable foreign grease smoke that had escaped my vents. She had even included a weather report screenshot, highlighting the wind direction, which she claimed was conclusive evidence of intent to pollute. The final sentence was the killer. As mitigation efforts have failed, and as the smell of your stew is now interfering with the resale value of my property, I am pursuing all legal and administrative options to secure an injunction against your egregious exhaust system. You have until the 1st of May to comply with my demands. Cease and desist all high-aroma cooking, or install a professional-grade air filtration system that directs all effluents upwards and away from my dwelling. I reread it, then I reread the title cease. My beef and Guinness stew, a dish that nourishes the soul, was being called Toxic Plume. This wasn't about the smell anymore. This was a crusade, This was an attempt to fundamentally change who I was and what I enjoyed doing in my own home. This wasn't a skirmish. It was a declaration of war. I looked across the driveway at her house. Her bedroom window, framed by pristine white shutters, was maybe 50 feet from my kitchen wall. 50 feet, separated by a thin strip of grass and a low hedge. And that's when the little, sarcastic, deeply vindictive angel on my shoulder whispered a truly magnificent idea. Why should I exhaust my cooking upwards? Why should I direct it away? She wants to feel the scent of my kitchen? Fine. She's going to feel it. She's going to feel it with the intensity of a jet engine powered by pure, unadulterated, glorious garlic. I immediately pulled out my phone, opening a browser tab. The search bar already knew what I was typing. Industrial Exhaust Fan Commercial Grade, CFM. I was done being polite. I was going to find a contractor who specialized in the profoundly unreasonable. This was going to be the most expensive, most ridiculous appliance purchase of my entire life, and I was going to enjoy every single aromatic cubic foot of it. The first guy I called, Joe's Handyman Services, sounded like he ran his business out of a rusty pickup. I figured he might be desperate, or at least open-minded. "Yeah, so what's the job?" Joe asked, his voice crackling over the phone like dry leaves. "It's an install," I said, trying to sound casual, like I did this every Tuesday. "I need a fan installed in my kitchen wall. A big one, industrial grade." "Sure, we do commercial installs," Joe replied, sounding slightly more interested. "What kind of CFM are we talking about? 5,000? 10,000? "No, Joe. I'm thinking something closer to 20,000 CFM. A pressure-controlled, explosion-proof, stainless steel industrial ventilation fan. And here's the kicker. I need it installed low on the exterior wall, and the duct needs to be aimed specifically, horizontally, at the second-story bedroom window of my neighbor's house." Silence. Long, heavy, beautiful silence. I could practically hear Joe calculating the potential criminal charges in his head. "Wait, you want a fan that could suck a squirrel off a tree pointed like a cannon at a lady's bedroom?" "Not a lady, Joe. The lady. And yes, pointed horizontally. I'm looking for maximum airflow efficiency and neighborhood engagement. I'll pay double the standard rate. Triple." Joe coughed. "Look, mister, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but my insurance guy, bless his heart, he has opinions about directed airflow projects. We usually stick to replacing toilets and hanging shelves, stuff that doesn't involve weaponized ambient smell." He hung up. Just like that. The second contractor, a slick operation called Precision Ventilation Solutions, was worse. The guy, who introduced himself as Chad, quoted me $5,000 just for the consultation and used the word synergy 5 times in 3 minutes. When I explained the directionality of the intended airflow, he paused the corporate jargon. "Sir, legally, we can only direct exhaust into a pre-approved municipal airspace according to Section 14B of the Air Quality Index. That fan, and a 20,000 CFM fan is basically an entry-level jet engine, is meant for commercial kitchens, not targeted aroma delivery." Chad was out. Too many rules. Too much synergy. I must have called 6 different places. Each one tried to upsell me on a roof-mounted system that would dutifully exhaust my smells upwards, like a good, compliant citizen. But that defeated the entire point. I didn't want compliance. I wanted an atmospheric declaration of war. It was late Friday night, and I was about to give up and just buy a ridiculous amount of scented candles when I stumbled across a listing on a local contractor site. The Exhaust Guys. We solve ventilation problems, the weird ones. Their slogan alone gave me hope. I called the number. A gruff voice answered. "Yeah, Exhaust Guys. What's your beef?" "I have a specific beef," I said, "and it involves a powerful industrial fan, a deeply annoying neighbor, and a very deliberate aiming mechanism." I laid out the whole plan, the 20,000 CFM fan I'd already ordered online, a beast called the Cyclone Pro, the exterior wall mounting, and the essential instruction that the outlet nozzle must be pointed directly at Karen's second-story bedroom window. There was a chuckle on the other end. Wait, you're trying to blast her house with delicious air? That's inspired. This was Stan. Stan was my guy. It's a matter of principle, Stan. She complained about the passive odor. I'm providing an active solution. Stan took a deep breath. All right, look, we can't officially call it targeted aroma, delivery. But we can call it maximizing horizontal flow efficiency due to localized atmospheric resistance. We just need you to sign a liability waiver so big it needs its own zip code. You pay cash up front, and we treat this like a top-secret military operation. I agreed immediately. Cash up front, top-secret military operation, liability waiver the size of Texas. This was going to be glorious. The installation itself was a comedy of errors. Stan and his crew, 3 guys who looked like they moonlighted as professional wrestlers and were clearly enjoying the absurdity of the job, showed up at 7 o'clock a.m. on a Saturday in a beat-up box truck. They looked less like contractors and more like they were about to steal a bank vault. The Cyclone Pro was monstrous. It wasn't the sleek, elegant thing you see in a magazine. It was a heavy, gray, stainless steel cube with a massive 6-blade impeller. When they slid it out of the truck, it looked less like an appliance and more like a captured alien spacecraft. "This is going to require some serious bracing, boss," Stan said, surveying the wall. "She's going to shake the house when she's running." "Excellent," I replied, watching them try to maneuver the thing past my prize-winning rosebush. "Shaking is good. Shaking adds emphasis." They had to cut a huge rectangular hole in my kitchen wall. Slice, clang, thunk. It sounded like they were performing emergency surgery on my home. Stan used an industrial rivet gun that made such a racket I thought the neighbors 3 blocks over were going to complain. I kept an eye on Karen's house. Her windows were closed, her shutters drawn. But I knew she was in there, probably cataloging every single bang and clatter in a new laminated document. The crane moment. The fan was too heavy to lift onto the exterior platform they'd built, so they had to use a small, rented hydraulic crane that looked wildly disproportionate next to my small suburban home. This was a clear violation of every HOA aesthetic rule, but Stan was operating on a higher plane of anti-Karen strategy. The alignment ritual. Stan used a laser level and a ridiculously complex series of measuring tapes to ensure the fan was aimed with surgical precision. "We gotta make sure that vortex hits her petunias before it hits her window," he muttered seriously. "It's all about trajectory." The test fire. Before sealing it up, Stan ran the power for a brief test. The sheer volume of air movement was staggering. My kitchen curtains billowed outward like flags in a hurricane. Outside, the leaves on the maple tree across the driveway started pointing due east, even though there wasn't a breath of wind otherwise. The noise was not inconsiderable. Stan gave me a thumbs up. "She's good, boss. She's got thrust." The final Polish. They installed a custom-made, slightly menacing-looking cowl around the outlet. A sleek, stainless steel duct that looked like the muzzle of a large food-smell-delivering cannon, pointed with laser precision at Karen's bedroom window. The entire process took 8 hours. Stan handed me the final invoice, a shockingly large number that I happily paid in a stack of crisp hundreds. "Now remember, boss," Stan advised, leaning in conspiratorially. "That Cyclone Pro pulls serious amperage. Don't run her all day. And don't run her without something to exhaust, or she'll probably suck the oxygen right out of your house." "Understood," I said, shaking his hand. "Only when the cooking is maximal, and only when the target is clear." With a final, knowing nod, the exhaust guys packed up their tools, folded the liability waiver into a tiny paper airplane, and drove off, leaving me alone with my new, magnificent, profoundly aggressive appliance. The wall was patched, the wires were connected, and the Cyclone Pro sat like a silver-gray sentinel, waiting. The moment of truth came at 7:00 p.m. that Saturday. I decided to go big for the inaugural blast. No subtle seasonings, no polite herbs. I went straight for the culinary equivalent of an air horn, deep-fried garlic knots and caramelized onion soup. The garlic knots smelled like a legitimate Italian restaurant, maybe better. The soup was the real killer, though. Caramelizing 5 pounds of onions in butter creates an aroma so pervasive, so pungent, and so deeply, overwhelmingly onion that it lingers on clothes for days. I had both simmering beautifully. The kitchen was a steamy, fragrant paradise. I put on my "Don't Go Bacon My Heart" apron, took a deep breath of the glorious heavy air, and went to the wall switch Stan had installed next to the stove. It was a big, satisfying, industrial-looking toggle switch. I flipped it. Clunk. The Cyclone Pro roared to life. It didn't purr. It thundered. The sound was a deep, resonant hum, and my entire kitchen suddenly became a vacuum. I could feel the air pressure drop. More importantly, the concentrated, delicious onion and garlic-laden air was violently sucked out of the hole in the wall and compressed into a magnificent, high-velocity plume. I rushed to the window and peered out the small sliver of glass I hadn't covered with insulation. Across the driveway, I saw it. The concentrated cloud of my dinner hitting Karen's house. It wasn't a gentle diffusion. It was a specific, visible stream of heat, vapor, and aroma that shot across the 50 feet of lawn, angled slightly upwards, and smashed directly into the closed white shutters of Karen's bedroom window. The leaves on the low hedge between our properties actually shivered as the culinary vortex passed. I imagined the scene inside her house. Karen, likely in the middle of a delicate vinyasa pose or sipping mint tea, suddenly hit with the atmospheric force of a 1,000-pound onion, butter, and garlic bomb. Bam! And then the light in her bedroom snapped on. She didn't come to the door this time. She came to the window. The shutters opened violently. Karen stared, out her face a mask of utter, unadulterated horror. She wasn't angry. She was flustered. She was smelling something so intense, so focused, and so clearly intentional that it short-circuited her ability to compose a passive-aggressive rebuttal. She threw her window open and leaned out. "What is that?" she shrieked, her voice thin against the fan's low roar. "It smells like a bread factory exploded." I smiled, gave her a little two-finger wave, and went back to frying the last of the garlic knots. Victory smelled like caramelized butter and existential despair. Karen's counterattack was swift and predictable, but she upgraded her game. She didn't come to my door. She knew direct confrontation was a lost cause. I was apparently immune to basic neighborly courtesy. This time, she went straight for the official channels. The next morning, I found 3 different official notices taped to my mailbox. Noise ordinance violation, citing the sustained mechanical hum exceeding the decibel limits for residential zones, which was an utter lie. The fan was loud, but not that loud. Structural modification. Permit inquiry, questioning the legality of the exterior modification and demanding to see the engineering schematics. Good luck, Stan drew them on a napkin. Notice of cease and desist from a law firm, Schmaltz and Associates, demanding I decommission the industrial-grade air displacement unit within 72 hours or face injunctive action. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my morning coffee, which was, ironically, the only thing I made that day that didn't require the Cyclone Pro. The nerve! Schmaltz and Associates? That sounded like a firm that specialized in overpriced, low-stakes pettiness. I called the law firm immediately. "Schmaltz and Associates, how may I direct your call?" a bored voice asked. "Yes, I'm calling about the industrial-grade air displacement unit," I said, injecting the maximum amount of theatrical gravitas into the title. "I'm Mr. Davies." "One moment, please. I'll transfer you to Ms. Montgomery's assigned paralegal." I was transferred to a man named Gary, who sounded like he was counting down the seconds until lunch. Gary. "Mr. Davies, this is Gary. We represent Ms. Montgomery regarding your odor delivery system." Me. "Look, Gary, I'm looking at your letter. It mentions the fan. It never mentions the smell. Tell me, Gary, is there a law in this great nation against aiming a fan?" Gary. "Well, no, but the fan is creating a nuisance. The noise is a violation." Me. "The noise is a low hum, Gary. It's significantly quieter than a typical lawnmower, and I only run it for 30 minutes during dinner prep. Plus, I have documentation from the manufacturer proving the dB level is within regulation, provided it's installed correctly, which it is." Gary, sounding exasperated. "The intention, Mr. Davies, is malicious. You have aimed a commercial-grade fan designed to move 20,000 cubic feet of air per minute directly at my client's private quarters." Me. "Gary, I simply hired a contractor, the Exhaust Guys, great work, highly recommend, to install a high-efficiency ventilation system that maximizes the removal of cooking particulates from my kitchen, which, I remind you, is what Ms. Montgomery demanded I do. The optimal path for said maximum removal just happens to be a straight line from my stove to, well, right where the fan is aimed. Are you asking me to prove that my ventilation isn't efficient? Because I assure you, it's currently the most efficient odor reduction system in the entire state of Arizona." Gary sighed, a deep, professional sigh of defeat. "We will be pursuing other avenues, Mr. Davies." "You do that, Gary, and tell Ms. Montgomery that tonight the smells will be spicy chili con carne. She might want to invest in some stronger Glade plugins." The next major interaction came 2 days later, not from a law firm, but from a genuine, actual, uniformed police officer. It was 6:30 p.m., and I was just flipping the Cyclone Pro on to exhaust the aroma of my new signature dish, slow-roasted garlic chili salmon, a pungent and slightly oily choice, when I saw the flashing blue and red lights. "Oh, here we go." I quickly turned the fan off, no need to accidentally pepper spray an officer with fish particles, and waited. A polite, weary-looking officer, whose name tag read Officer Chen, walked up my drive. "Mr. Davies?" he asked, trying to sound firm but mostly sounding confused. "That's me, officer. Everything okay? Did my parking cone infraction finally catch up to me?" "No, sir. We received a complaint regarding a persistent public nuisance involving a mechanical device, and, I quote, deliberate atmospheric terrorism using concentrated food odors." He pulled out a small notepad and looked utterly miserable. "Ah, yes, the Cyclone Pro, and its targeted atmospheric delivery system. What seems to be the official charge, officer? Assault with a deadly waft?" Officer Chen suppressed a smile. Barely. "The charge is nuisance, Mr. Davies. Your neighbor, Ms. Montgomery, states that you are intentionally using this large fan to blow offensive smells into her residence." "Offensive smells? Officer, I am cooking salmon. It's a clean protein, and I am using my ventilation system to exhaust the vapors from my private kitchen into the general airspace. I am not violating any zoning, air quality, or noise ordinances. I checked. The fan is legally installed on my property. Are you telling me it is a crime to push air across my own driveway? I could see the logic gate melting in the officer's head. This wasn't a real crime. It was a domestic dispute that had metastasized into an industrial engineering problem. Sir, can you see that she finds the smell offensive? I can see that she claims to find it offensive. Officer, if I were running a meth lab, that would be illegal. If I were playing my music too loud at 3 a.m., that would be illegal. But I'm cooking dinner. The fan simply provides maximum exhaust efficiency. It is her choice to leave her bedroom window open in the direct line of my maximally efficient exhaust plume, isn't it? Officer Chen rubbed the bridge of his nose. Look, Mr. Davies, I understand the technicality. But can't you just turn it around or aim it up? And admit defeat to the forces of suburban tyranny? Never, officer. This isn't just about salmon anymore. This is about a man's right to cook a powerfully scented meal without being harassed by a clipboard-wielding zealot who doesn't like the smell of my prosperity. He sighed. He looked at the massive, menacing fan mounted on my wall, then at Karen's house, where a curtain was twitching. All right, Mr. Davies, I have to file a report. But legally, if you're not breaking any noise or permit rules, there's nothing I can do beyond mediation. Please, just try to keep the aroma to a minimum. I will try, officer, I said, unable to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. But you know how potent high-quality spices can be. Tell Ms. Montgomery that tonight's salmon is sustainably sourced, and I'll send the next waft with love. Officer Chen gave me a slow, defeated nod, got back in his patrol car, and drove away. No doubt heading straight back to the station to write a memo titled, The Great Exhaust Fan Incident, Culinary Warfare. The police report did nothing but embolden Karen. She saw it as a temporary setback, not a defeat. She stopped leaving her bedroom window open, smart. But she started leaving air purifiers running constantly, and she installed a large, cheap wind chime in her front yard, hoping the clanging would drown out the fan's hum. The situation had officially transitioned into a culinary arms race, and I was just getting started. I wasn't just cooking dinner anymore, I was engaging in strategic, targeted aroma warfare. The tuna test, Tuesday. I made my grandmother's tuna melt, but I used the absolute stinkiest canned tuna I could find and fried it in butter and onions. I hit the Cyclone Pro for a solid 20 minutes. Karen responded by stringing up a massive, flapping banner on her fence that read, AR Quality Violation Zone. The Sauerkraut Surprise, Thursday. I decided to go Eastern European. Steaming sauerkraut boiled with bratwurst. This smell, unlike the others, wasn't necessarily good or bad. It was just incredibly, undeniably, and powerfully sour. I ran the fan until my kitchen was fog-free, while Karen's front door suddenly bore a sign. Emergency meditation session in progress. Do not disturb. The fish sauce cabbage stew, Friday. This was my masterpiece of intentional aggression. A Vietnamese-inspired cabbage stew, heavy on the fish sauce. If you know fish sauce, you know that the initial smell is pure, unadulterated, pungent salt and fish. It's an aroma that hits you like a brick. This was the moment I realized I was using the fan less for cooking and more for psychological conditioning. I saw Karen's gardener covering his nose as he trimmed her hedges. My wife, let's call her Sarah, who was enjoying the whole spectacle from the safety of the living room, started referring to my cooking schedule as my daily sense briefing. Okay, Commander, she said one night, pouring herself a glass of wine. What's the briefing for tomorrow? We need something with maximum lingering effect. The sauerkraut wore off too fast. Tomorrow, my love, I declared, adjusting my "don't go bacon my heart" apron, is going to be the day of the chili. Specifically, a 6-hour, slow-cooked 4-alarm chili. Beans, beef, tomatoes, cocoa powder, beer, and more chili powder than is strictly necessary. The aroma of simmering chili is dense, it's low-hanging, and it travels beautifully. It's also the kind of smell that makes people think of football games and manliness. It's the ultimate Americana aroma, making her vegan-based complaint even more absurd. She nodded approvingly. Targeted ideological deployment. I like it. Just be careful not to trigger any actual heat alarms. I was playing a dangerous game. The fan was a glorious, ridiculous weapon, but I knew I was running out of steam. This was starting to consume my life. The HOA meeting was looming, and Schmaltz and Associates were still sending vaguely threatening letters about injunctive relief. Karen was becoming more and more desperate, her retaliation techniques escalating from passive-aggressive signage to actual physical countermeasures. She started running a small, smoky fire pit on her patio whenever I started cooking, seemingly attempting to neutralize my smells with burning wood. It smelled faintly like a failed scout campfire. The time had come for the ultimate culinary showdown. I needed to cook a meal so significant, so important, and so inherently good that it would turn the tide of local public opinion irrevocably in my favor. I decided to host a massive, impromptu neighborhood BBQ, the showdown meal. I needed a culinary climax. The day I chose for the showdown meal was a Saturday in late May. I invited the whole block, everyone except Karen, obviously. I set up 3 massive grills, 2 smokers, and prepared the main event: pulled pork shoulder, Memphis-style dry rub. This was the zenith of scent delivery. The meat smokes for 12 hours. It uses hickory and cherry wood. The aroma isn't just food, it's a lifestyle choice. It's the smell of summer, of friendly gatherings, of community. And I was going to use my Cyclone Pro to ensure that the delicious, hickory-smoked, meaty fog was directed with unparalleled efficiency. The neighbors, the ones not named Karen, were thrilled. They brought side dishes, 6-packs, and a general sense of collective anticipation. They were tired of the weekly, passive-aggressive spectacle, and they were firmly on the side of the guy making the good-smelling food. As the smoke started to roll, rich, dense, and sweetly pungent, I cranked the Cyclone Pro up. Clunk, whir. The fan worked in conjunction with the smoker, pulling the concentrated, flavorful smoke through the wall and focusing it into a single, majestic plume aimed directly at Karen's house. It was a beautiful sight, a delicious, smoky arrow pointing squarely at the source of all my angst. Karen, predictably, went ballistic. She didn't call the police this time. She went for the nuclear option. She called the fire department. Suddenly, 2 big red trucks with their lights flashing and sirens wailing roared around the corner. They weren't coming for my house. They were coming for the smoke. A burly fire chief, hatchet in hand, approached my front yard where 30-odd people were enjoying the sight and the smells. Fire chief, through a megaphone pointing at my smoker. "Sir, we have received a report of an uncontrolled fire and excessive smoke that is creating a public hazard." Me, waving a BBQ fork in the air. "Chief, welcome to the neighborhood BBQ. This is controlled smoke from an offset smoker. It's pulled pork, it's delicious, and the fan, I gestured grandly at the Cyclone Pro, which was now vibrating with effort, is merely providing maximum draw efficiency. The crowd cheered. The fire chief, a big man with a mustache that practically qualified as a separate entity, took one deep breath of the air. His eyes went wide. "Sweet Moses," he muttered, lowering the megaphone. "That smells like heaven wrapped in bacon." Karen, seeing her fire department gambit fail, emerged from her house. She was wearing a medical mask and goggles, looking like she was preparing for a chemical attack. "Chief, that man is deliberately assaulting the neighborhood with an industrial-grade machine. Look at the density of that smoke. It's unbreathable," she shrieked, pointing at the Cyclone Pro. The fire chief scratched his head, looking from the industrial fan pointed at Karen's bedroom, to my perfectly contained smokers, to the group of neighbors happily holding beers. "Ma'am, I'm smelling slow-smoked pork shoulder. It's not an emergency," the chief said, barely hiding his amusement. "In fact, I'm smelling some excellent bark formation. I can't issue a citation for cooking food, ma'am." Karen: "But the fan, the noise, the vibration." Me: "The fan, Chief, is simply clearing my kitchen of the particulate matter that Ms. Montgomery previously complained about. I am solving her problem with maximum efficiency." Karen's face was a study in profound, unholy rage. She was cornered. Her legal, police, and fire department efforts had all failed. She had one last, desperate trick. She ran back into her house, and a few seconds later, I heard the sound of glass breaking. Not my glass. Her glass. She had thrown a rock at one of her own windows, presumably to make it look like the fan's vibration had caused property damage. But that wasn't the final climax. The final climax was a subtle, delicious twist of fate. I had been running the Cyclone Pro for nearly 3 hours, sucking out the smoke, oil, and heat, pushing it right at her house. The fan was a beast, and its motor was getting hot. I should have listened to Stan. Just as Karen stepped back outside to survey the glass she'd broken, the inevitable happened. The fan, having been run at max capacity for too long, hit a thermal cutoff, but not before delivering one last powerful atmospheric blast. Ka-thwoomp. The fan didn't explode, but the intense air pressure, combined with the heat and the smoke particles, caused a momentary pressure spike right at the exit cowl. That massive, focused column of air, oil, and smoke, instead of hitting her house, suddenly rebounded off the pressure zone created by her closed windows and the natural resistance of her house's exterior. It was like a slow-motion, delicious smoke cannon recoil. The smoke, instead of dispersing, coiled back on itself. A huge, thick, beautiful brown-gray cloud of pure, concentrated hickory and pork rub smoke, the product of 3 hours of industrial-grade culinary exhaust, suddenly engulfed Karen's entire front lawn. It was a total whiteout. You couldn't see her expensive garden gnomes, you couldn't see her AIR Quality Violation Zone banner, and you certainly couldn't see Karen. The neighbors gasped, then burst into uncontrollable laughter. Karen, still in her medical mask and goggles, started flailing wildly as the dense, meaty fog swallowed her whole. The smoke cleared in about 60 seconds, revealing a coughing, sputtering Karen who looked like she'd just wrestled a very delicious bear. She looked at the Cyclone Pro, which was now silent, having entered thermal shutdown. She looked at the fire chief, who was now being handed a beer by one of my guests. She looked at the neighbors, who were literally taking photos. She ran inside her house, not to come out again that day. I won. Not just the battle, but the war. The next day, I woke up to a profound silence, The laminated formal culinary violation notice was gone. The clanging wind chime had vanished. The little Glade plug-in was nowhere to be seen. A week later, a for sale sign went up on Karen's lawn. It was printed in a tasteful beige font, none of the bright, flashy colors of a quick sale. The listing described the house as having minimal traffic noise and excellent neighborhood quietude. The other neighbors, however, were thrilled. Mrs. Rodriguez from 2 doors down brought me a pie. "That was the best, funniest thing I've seen in 10 years, she whispered, handing me the pie. "Keep that fan." I did. The Cyclone Pro remained on the side of my house, a monument to passive-aggressive victory. I still use it too, but judiciously. Usually just a 15-minute blast of good-smelling air every Friday, just to remind any potential new owners, or any old, disgruntled vegans who might be lurking in the area, exactly what the neighborhood standards are. The whole saga of the fan and the smells cost me a few $1,000s, 2 hours of my life arguing with a paralegal named Gary, and one awkward conversation with a fire chief who smelled like pulled pork for the rest of his shift. But it was worth every penny. It wasn't about the food. It wasn't even about the fan. It was about the simple, fundamental right to enjoy your home and your hobbies without fear of laminated documents or homeowners association tyranny. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm thinking of making some garlic and rosemary focaccia tonight, and you know what that means. I just need to wait for a slight easterly breeze, flip that industrial toggle switch, and deliver a small, pungent, and perfectly targeted reminder of the day a man decided to fight bureaucracy with a $2,000 fan and the sweet, powerful aroma of victory.